one of the next fellows, I was one of the young people asked to gather young inputs from young people around the world for the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. And that was about 4 years ago, and it's when we first started hearing whispers of the Summit of the Future. So it's very exciting to kind of see that it's coming to fruition. But whilst it's exciting, I think for many people it's been a little bit disappointing. So in many ways, the road to the Summit of the Future has been more open to civil society than before. In particular, the UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi earlier this year was the first time a civil society conference has been kind of explicitly linked to a summit, a member state summit. It was also the first time a UN civil society conference has happened in the global south, opening up the doors for many people to participate who otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And we also had the introduction of a concept of impact coalitions, which is an introduction by the co-chairs of the UN Civil Society Conference. These were coalitions which encouraged member states to work with non-state actors. So in that sense, it's all been kind of positive. But I think it's also fair to say that the road to the summit's process and the Pact for the Future has fallen short of many people's expectations. I have an explicit memory in Nairobi, for example, the permanent representative to Germany attended the session that we were organizing and kind of explicitly told us that many of the proposals we were talking about at that point would not make it into the Pact for the Future. And I think many people had similarly disheartening experiences. I think the same with the Pact for the Future. It was probably not the kind of game-changing, era-defining piece of the work that we wanted to be. But within this kind of sentiment of disappointment, I think it's important to remember that hope is absolutely not lost. You may have heard this kind of message before this week, but I think it's really important that we start to use the hooks that are in the Summit of the Future, in the Pact for the Future, as well as we can, to hold member states accountable for the change that we want to see. And on this subject, particularly of civic space, for example, in Action 13B of the Pact for the Future, member states committed to provide equal access to justice, protect civic space, and uphold human rights for all. And in the Digital Compact, they committed to create to promote safe civic spaces in digital spaces. I mean, it's not a lot, it's not specific, but it's a hook with which we can, and I think must work with. And it's been said today before, but everywhere civic spaces and the voices of civil society are being squeezed out, which not only puts individuals at risk, but really stifles optimism and opportunities for positive change for people and planet. I think that's why discussions and spaces like this are so important, and even more so than the discussion, the kind of action that they inspire. So I look forward to hearing what you all have to say today, and thank you.
Thank you so much for this. And maybe specifically on the hooks, I would maybe hand it on to Mandeep to take us a bit into also the existing initiatives and what you want to share about how we can pursue them forwards, and maybe also what you all can share about your work with these initiatives.
Thank you very much, and warm welcome. Good afternoon to all of you. I just want to start firstly by recognizing Juan Lopez. In case you don't know who Juan Lopez was, he was a Honduran human rights, land rights activist who was recently murdered for his work. He was helping protect the Guapanal River. Exactly. And there's thousands of Juan Lopezes who are being persecuted as we speak. There's thousands of civil society activists, human rights defenders who uncover high-level corruption, who seek transformative change in societies, who are working to advance human rights and social justice, who are imprisoned, unjustly imprisoned, despite the fact that the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has held the imprisonment of some of them as arbitrary. And that is just a stark reminder of the work that we have to do. I also want to recognize the citizen activists who are documenting the genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity that are taking place in the occupied Palestinian territories as we speak. Also want to recognize Sudanese youth groups who are providing important humanitarian assistance as weapons continue to flow between warring parties in Sudan and cause innumerable suffering to so many people and for future generations. Also want to recognize Ukrainian activists who are helping displaced people get on with their lives and also ensuring that supply chains and public services are available to people without any corruption. Also want to recognize the brave activists in Afghanistan who are providing education to women and girls as we speak at great risk to their lives, but ensuring that life goes on for them. So with this context in mind, we hoped that when the summit of the future was going to be put in place, that it would create a futuristic, innovative, and global response to the challenges faced by civil society who do so much to support the UN's charter, who do so much to support human rights law and the UN's framework. Unfortunately, the Summit of the Future has not delivered in any substantive terms on issues around civic space or civil society participation. In fact, if you look at the draft of the Pact for the Future, look for human rights defenders, and you will probably find it's not there. Also, we hoped that the Summit of the Future would create pathways to better participation of people in civil society around the world. And I see Andreas Bammel is there, with whom we work very closely, and Caroline Vernellen is also there, on the We the People's campaign, where we had asked for three things to happen in the Pact for the Future. We had urged the co-facilitators of the Pact to first put in place the starting of a parliamentary assembly whereby people could have direct representation in the UN's decision making. That did not come through. We also urged that a UN citizens initiative could be put forward, which is on the lines of the EU citizens initiative, where a critical mass of global citizens could bring an issue of transnational importance to the UN for discussion. Thirdly, we urged that there would be the appointment of a people's or a civil society envoy to promote better participation of civil society in UN processes, to ensure that there's diversity and equity, but also to drive the UN's outreach to people around the world. Many civil society groups whom we work with did not know about the Summit of the Future, or do not understand how to engage with the UN's sprawling processes. None of these really made it into the Pact for the Future. But I don't want to be fully pessimistic, because we in civil society thrive on resolute optimism. There is an important commitment to strengthening the human rights pillar in the Pact for the Future. The human rights pillar, as you know, is supposed to be equal in importance with the other two pillars of peace and security and sustainable development. But the Pact for the Future emphasizes that there can be no peace and security, and there can be no sustainable development without human rights. So that's what we have to build on. We know that all of us in our work with several UN experts who have to work on shoestring budgets, experts ranging from special rapporteur on protection of human rights defenders, special rapporteur on sexual orientation and gender identity, the special rapporteur on freedom of peaceful assembly and association, special rapporteur on violence against women, and so on. And those special rapporteurs and experts are not given enough resources. So we hope that the strengthening of the UN's human rights pillar will lead to more resources for them. It will also lead to a better human rights audit of the UN system of different agencies and departments across the UN, and it will lead to better investigative capacities of the UN to investigate some of the most serious crimes under international human rights law. But let me stop there, and it'll be a real good opportunity to also hear from all of you what you think about the Summit of the Future outcomes, and how can we make the best of what we have and continue to push for better outcomes at the UN through civil society participation and engagement.
Thank you so much. That's very powerful, and I feel like there's, especially in this time, we know that there have been calls for changes from within the system that have not really been anything more than calls and words. And so I feel like it's really important also to share the initiatives that we all are doing. And I think a great one that is being pursued by my colleague Elena is the hashtag SDG16 now. And so please, if you could share some more about this.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for the overwhelming interest in the session and for sticking around even after the lunch was served. Really excited to share maybe just very brief kind of reflections, I think, from the perspective of the TAP network. So I am employed by the TAP network, the Transparency, Accountability, and Participation Network. And we lead up the SDG 16 Now campaign, which really focuses on accelerating action, scaling up action on SDG 16, peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And I think in some ways, maybe I'm about to sort of like contradict the fact that our campaign is called SDG 16 now, but I think something that we've really noticed through these past several months in terms of mobilizing our colleagues as part of this campaign is that we need to really break beyond our silos. And I think specifically SDG 16, it's a very nerdy, kind of geeky SDG. A lot of folks maybe aren't intimately acquainted with the targets and indicators of SDG 16. And so rather than kind of expecting folks from other areas like the feminist movement, the youth movement, to come to us and say, oh yeah, we want to help and support your campaign, I think we as a community have really started, and at least myself and my colleague John as the secretariat, have really started to think about how we can show up in and stand in solidarity with other interest groups. I think now more than ever, with the shrinking space around the world and shrinking funding for civil society organizations, there's so much competition amongst those of us working in civil society at a global level, and I think in a lot of ways that can create so much stress, so much competition for your piece of the pie as part of civil society. And so I think something that I'm curious to hear other folks' perspectives and thoughts on as well is, like, in what ways can we better build solidarity amongst those of us working on issues at the UN? Obviously recognizing that we as civil society are not a monolith. We don't all agree with one another on a lot of things. But rather than sort of firmly staking our flag in the ground in one specific area of work, what can we do to better amplify the work of others and sort of bring, everyone thinks that, their SDG is the most important SDG. It's going to be the one that's to solve all of the SDGs. And no one lives a single SDG life, right? Like no one just lives their life through the lens of SDG 16 or SDG 3 or 5, right? Or 4. I know now everybody's wanting me to mention their SDG, right? But no one lives a single SDG life. And so when we are really thinking about our mobilizing, I think this is something from the perspective of our campaign that's really at the forefront, thinking about, how can we have a really representative group of activists and civil society leaders from subnational to global level, really advancing these issues. And so, like, through the campaign, and I have some more information if folks are interested and if your work kind of intersects with 16. Specifically, we're really looking to start to work more with the youth peace and security agenda and the women peace and security agendas as well. So yeah, just happy to kind of connect and chat with folks and also hear from your perspectives as well. So I think I'll end there.
Thanks so much. I think this is a very important point that you mentioned, and many people don't mention it, the aspect of competition also within the CSO world, disagreement, and how this is often also being used against civil society so that we disagree among ourselves and therefore don't really get anywhere together. But this is something that I think needs to be discussed and tackled. Also, this whole question of how can a deliberative democracy lead to successful participation, and I think this is something where Jeffrey has also been working on quite a bit. So I'll try to hand over the microphone. You.
Thank you, Remo. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeffrey. I'm coming here on behalf of the European Environmental Bureau, which is a network of environmental citizens organizations, and also SDG Watch Europe. So we are a civil society network based in Brussels, really advocating for ambitious implementation of the SDGs around the European institutions. But today I'm coming to you more from the perspective of citizens' participation and deliberative democracy, and seeing how we could possibly strengthen this both at the European level, but also the international level. And since it's a session on democracy, maybe could I ask if we can do a quick show of hands on a few points, which in my mind, when I came to think about what we wanted to say today. So please just raise your hand if you feel that the economic governance system today is unjust. Okay, that's a very strong show of hands there. So not so much debate perhaps needed on that. The second one is really on, maybe raise your hand if you think it's becoming more difficult over the past years to do advocacy and do work on Agenda 2030. Okay, so less consensus there, but I think still a strong show of hands. So what could we kind of do really to turn these things around? I mean, we have been doing some research on deliberative democracy and on public participation by kind of convening a series of sort of mini citizens panels where we've been bringing citizens together from all around Europe and other countries to basically come and discuss environmental policies and social policies and what kind of ideas that they have. And I think what we would like to see here is, because in the, I mean, Mandeep, you mentioned also the UN initiatives to bring kind of more deliberative democracy at UN level. And we've been following very closely what the European Union is doing, but we see a very worrying trend, I think, of citizen washing. And very much many of these participatory processes today are largely a kind of tick box exercise. Yes, we've spoken to citizens and they want this, but often these things are not done in a very, very meaningful way. So our work has been figuring what are the best sort of like protocols and practices that we can bring in. Another key thing is, okay, maybe another quick show of hands. Who feels that the voice of nature is well represented in policy decision making today? No hands. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Anyone? Okay. That's fair as well. That's, yeah, absolutely. Who feels that the voice of future generations is well represented in policy making today? In your country, for example, where you come from. Let's say, you know, younger people, but then the generations unborn, the generations to come. I don't see any other hands here. No. Okay. Yeah. So those two were kind of key ideas when we brought citizens together. So we basically asked them to deliberate from these perspectives, and this is something that we would like to see the European Union doing, and we've been trying to kind of institutionalize these new approaches in deliberative democracy. As far as it goes for the international level, the EU does actually have a legal obligation under the Aarhus Convention, I think it's under Article 3, in order to promote deliberative democracy and public participation in environmental matter through this convention. But we feel that this is very much not being upheld. So we are also working hard with our team on environmental law and justice to kind of solve this. So this is a little bit, I think, especially as we were talking about the backdrop of shrinking civic space, an approach that we feel can maybe hopefully push things forward, but there's still many problems to avoid the kind of many traps of citizen washing that seem to exist today. And then I think the last thing maybe I'll mention is greater citizens' deliberation and public participation is really an excellent thing. We should all be pushing for this, and we would like to learn how to do it properly. But I think that's only really the first step, because the other point, and it's my final point, is really about it. We won't get there without also more economic democracy, and really more public control over how we allocate our public resources towards social and ecological goals. So this, I think, is the next step that we need to bring that into the case as well, because I don't know about you, but I mean, you can look around and I think you can see outside, even in countries with enormous amounts of resources, you know, basic human needs still fail to be met, and that is an incredibly inefficient use of our common good, our common world, and so that's not only inefficient, but it's also very, very undemocratic. And I think we need to look more closely at how we can bring this forward as well. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Remo.
Thank you so much for this. And we're continuing to talk about participation and democracy. We have one more input, and then we really want to hear from everyone around and actually practice this. But I think really important to talk what has been also touched earlier today on the discussion about meaningful stakeholder engagement. It would be really interesting to hear also from Carmen about her experiences and what she can share with us.
Well, thank you very much. I want to take you all to 1992, to Rio de Janeiro, to the Earth Summit, to a summit that has been so game changer that it's been over 30 years, and still we haven't seen the change that that reference still makes. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm part of the Women's Major Group for Sustainable Development. And the Women's Major Group, born in 1992, thanks to the Declaration of Principles from the Earth Summit, 27 principles that gave feet to the 9 major groups, that gave feet to the 3 conventions, climate change, biodiversity, and the certification, and a number of other things that are part of what we're doing around Agenda 2030, for example. So I really wish that the World Social Summit would also carry that spirit. And going back to the Declaration of Principles, we can recall Principle 10, which establishes that environmental decisions cannot be taken only by governments. They need civil society. And it took from 1992 until 2016, when we were able to have what is the Escazú Agreement for Latin America and the Caribbean. Is one of the first binding regional agreements that promotes access to information, access to participation, and access to justice on environmental issues. It also takes into account vulnerable populations and human rights defenders. So this is a framework that also in its Article 10 or Article 7 also establishes that international negotiations should be open to public participation, not like it's happening right now that the door is closed. But yeah, the important thing is that everything that has to be with environment has to take into account participation of civil society, because our human rights cannot be based on the suffering of other creatures. And that's why we've been working also on animal welfare, because and now we're going to have we have a convention on biodiversity, and we would think that this convention of biodiversity would be to kind of like look out for the incidents that our development has caused in ecosystems, in populations, in species. But no, it's because we cannot patent a bird or a tree. So let's take the genes. Let's take the genes, let's mix the genes, and let's start patenting those, because that way we can make money. As we speak, over 350,000 square kilometers of Amazonian forests have been burned because Amazonian forest doesn't give money to anyone. That's why South America is poor. That's the size of Germany. Germany is a first world developed country, and all of you must have an idea that has a high GDP and so on. But in Latin America, we can have the luxury of burning that in Amazonic forests because birds and animals do not have any price. They don't give us anything. So now we burn it. We're going to put soybean. We're going to put cow. We're going to put all these things that are commodities because those are the ones that give us money and that are going to take us out of poverty. Although we're still countries that, because of colonization, we are still losing our natural resources and we still have problems of inequality. And probably the worst is that in Latin America, if you want to protect a butterfly, you can be killed. So that's why it's important to enforce and to commit and to put international pressure so the Escazú Agreement can't be enforced by Latin American countries, because those are like the hotspots, those are like the things that we can still fight for, and because it is important to talk about human rights, but it's also very important to start noticing that we're not the only creature on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this powerful closing of our opening remarks. And so now we hope that you've all eaten and are not in your afternoon nap. We really want to open it up. Maybe get some reactions from you. I see there's already a lot of hands. I don't know if you have more microphones, otherwise I'll just share this one first. I'll go around here and then I'll.
Thank you very much. My name is Augustine from the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. This topic is very important because we're all here for the sake of participation in decision-making at all levels. We believe that what we've seen around the world, especially in the developing countries, is the mistake we make globally of thinking that democracy is just in the ballot box. Democracy has to be taken beyond the ballot box because we've seen countries where they have free and fair elections and the outcome, the governance, the day-to-day governance of the country isolates people, pushes away the civil society, and the governors are not accountable to the people. But when you look in the books, it is a democratic country because that regime was elected by the people. I think we have to come together and redefine democracy to go beyond the ballot box. It is the constant consultation of the people in all decisions so that the outcome respects what the people want. Good governance is not just the adequacy in a decision. It is more the process by which that decision was brought around. So we should pay attention to that in the civil society and push the northern governments that are helping the so-called democratic governments to become dictators because it serves the interests of the North to listen to the people. You see what is happening in Africa already. So it's our turn to also hold the northern governments accountable for what they're doing with our own governments. Thank you.
Hola a todos y a todas. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Cubillos. I'm from Colombia. And if you guys didn't know, Colombia almost like 3 or 4 weeks ago, we ratified the Escazú Agreement. Very, very tough fight. It cost us like 6 years to get it ratified. It cost a lot of lives of indigenous people, a lot of lives of rural people and people in the conflict zones to be able to ratify this. And now there's a big fight to be able to manage finance for it, to manage the implementation for it. And I think my question to the panelists and everybody is, how can we as youth, as civil society, not only stand on the we're advocating for something, and once that something is signed, it's on paper, once my country recognizes climate change, the fight ends there, but how can we as civil society not only do pressure but actually implementation as well?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to applaud the panel for sharing their perspectives. My name is Mithika. I work with also Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance based in Nairobi, Kenya. We work at a Pan-African level, particularly on climate justice. So Martin Luther one time said, injustice somewhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this actually highlights the interconnectedness of the whole society and the issues which we push. Whether you are working on climate justice, you are working on human rights, you are working on food security, you are working on ecosystem integrity, all of us, we need really to work together. And I agree with somebody there is that we work in silos. I don't work with those on environment because I think that they don't involve me or they're going to take my space. That's what has been happening. And so we spread ourselves thin, yet the forces which we are fighting are so strong that they need a combined effort. I think as we move forward, we need really to ask ourselves, where did the rain start beating us? Because we need to ask ourselves, are we accomplices in all what is happening as the civil society representing these people? In a way, yes. Are we accomplices? Where do we get resources? And are we eliticized? Even the philanthropists are supporting. This is what I went during the training. Because these are the things, and then we've lost it completely. And so even the philanthropists need really to think, because you are given $5,000 by a particular philanthropy. The HIPPO papers, I'm not saying that we should not account, but the HIPPO papers, they are much more interested in the accountability of that 5,000 than the work which you are doing. That's the bigger challenge. We also have now, there are small organizations at very local level which are doing a lot of work, but because of the way we are constructed, the social construct, those one cannot even qualify because they are supposed to give 3 years on-the-10 report, the reports of how can that small community really, my God, get that? So these are some of the things really. As we reflect this, we need to look into all those. We have failed ourselves. The other point is really competition among ourselves, particularly what we call local civil society and our international, I call them intermediary, NGOs, who go, of course, they are very connected in their North governments, get the money, and appoint myself and this one that now, in fact, if you seem to be very dependent, you are isolated. So they have a club, kind of a club. These are things we need to be honest with ourselves. First of all, we need to reflect on what we have done, rather than before even we look at that, we don't call them enemies, we call them adversaries. Before we even look at those adversaries, we look at us even as allies. What have we done? What are we not doing right? And this is the most important thing we have seen in the climate movement, that competition. Finally, is the issue of democracy. Really, why we need really to look at really and compelling evidence that the good governance can be associated with press. The can be associated with the human rights. And so what indicators do we have to do? Because we carry a lot of studies. So these are very important things we need, guys, we need to look. Otherwise, we are going, and then the issue of bottom up as top down. What is the role of the people we represent? Who do I represent? Do we have that critical mass really to drive the efforts which we want? These are very fundamental issues. I come from Kenya where we almost kicked out the president, and it's the young people, you see? And you know, you don't need any, we don't need a lot of money or resources to do that. We need organizing. We need to bring people together with a shared vision. That is what we lack. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for all the participants, all the organizers. I mean, in those difficult, very complicated periods. I mean, my name is Murat, and I'm working as international delegate for Euro-Turtle Center, based in Geneva, and created in 70s. So we are working at UN since 70s with consultative status. I mean, yeah, I think the reason why the origin of the Summit of the Future was the slogan of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and the health crisis, the pandemic. And as the pandemic has all this, you know, gaps and problems in international collaboration, etc. I mean, I think I'm one of those who thinks that Summit of the Future has revealed our weaknesses as well. So let's ask new questions. For example, are we disposed to close the gap between the NGOs and the real social movements, as was already mentioned by the previous contribution? Are we disposed, are we ready to break with, you know, proxy civil society aristocratic life? Are we disposed to break with working in silos? Are we disposed to get out of our comfort zones? Because, yeah, in some sense, at least not maybe you, all of you, but I'm part of this, you know, NGO aristocracy. And from time to time, I'm tired of this, you know, the NGO safari. So we are flying, running from one meeting to another. But I think sustainable development goals has been at least to some extent condemned to the failure, as it was said by the new director of Oxfam, because the political powers were at the service of the super rich categories. And we have lost years and years. So now, I mean, I just very friendly, openly, we are around 50, 60, and 70, whereas we have more than 5,000 civil society organizations with, you know, consultative status, etc. So we are not representing, of course, the people's. I mean, yeah, we are a small group of, you know, questioning, a little bit brave, civil society organizations and social movements, are we disposed to, I mean, put the mirror and ask to ourselves where we have failed? How have you been, you know, greenwashed, femme-washed? I mean, all of this list, because I mean, just to finish, let's not forget that, I mean, whatsoever your level of optimism or pessimism, this is not a question of, in my opinion, optimism or pessimism, but how do we close this gap between the women, between the and us, between the a new generation, between the colonized peoples, etc. So, I mean, I invite you to a little bit be more, less diplomatic and get rid of this, you know, I mean, NGO jargon, and then a bit, I mean, let's make our own, we request accountability to the large corporations, to the states, and if we apply this accountability to the NGO life, I think we must have a long list to discuss. I mean, thank you very much, and thank you also to the participations.
Should we come back and then get more questions after, or yeah? Or do you want to react to the very end? Keep going. Okay, does anybody else have a question? Okay, I will go here and then here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dais. Okay. We are talking about health. Okay. My name is Daisring Bakure. I come from the Gambia. I work for the Association for Non-Governmental Organization as executive director. I think we are all here to see how to get a better future and speak for the voiceless. But one thing, we as civil society, we have to have some takeaways from here when we are talking about the Summit of the Future, because we are here talking about People's Assembly. What can we take back to the people? One thing about civil society, it's been echoed before, I say, coordination. I think this is something we have to look at. Better coordination at the different level, internationally, nationally, regionally, sub-regionally. I think if we do that, that will help the civil space, because the space is shrinking at different parts of the world. And we all have to work together in solidarity. Yes, we do compete within ourselves, but we have to look at where our strengths are. We put it together and work on our weaknesses. I think this is very important. And also when it comes to governance, yes, this is an area we really need to advocate for. And I think we are here talking, and while others are there making the decision inside the hall in the United Nations headquarters, we should be well represented there, but we are not. Some of us might want to go inside there. You cannot, because there are a lot of limitations, like you need a special ticket to enter there. I thought the United Nations is for all of us, whether you're working for government or not government. We civil society always have to be on the margin. I think it's high time we be in the center. What can we do? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hard act to follow. I'm Megan Kolner. I'm the Executive Director of Accountable Now. We work to make civil society organizations more transparent, responsive, and accountable. And I've been really delighted to hear from so many comments the word accountability coming out over and over again. I didn't hear it as much from the panelists, so I am excited to hear more from you all on this. But I guess two kind of themes are coming up for me. The first is we've talked quite a bit about the fractures and infighting that happens within and across civil society, whether informal and formal, whether local to capital, whether national to international, and various sector divides and language divides. And I think we know from throughout history that the left is very good at eating our own. And so I wonder, what, especially from the panelists or others in the room, what are we seeing in terms of successful tactics and opportunities to work together in solidarity, as our last colleague just mentioned, and to realign our vision and actions and work together. And then the second piece that I haven't heard much about, but when at Accountable Now we think about civic space and it's shrinking, what we see across many contexts is governments constantly changing and rewriting regulations to catch out civil society efforts in country. Colleagues, of course, from Nicaragua, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, and many more would be able to share much greater details on this than I will at the moment. But I'm also wondering what the panelists might have seen in terms of some of these challenges and opportunities for staying a step ahead of these governments. Yeah, and then please talk more about accountability. That's our favorite word. Thank you.
We have one.
Hello, my name is Andreas Bummel. I'm with Democracy Without Borders, and we have been co-convening with the People's Campaign for Inclusive Global Governance since it was launched in 2019 before the pandemic. And I want to make a little contribution to the strategic debate. First of all, maybe one remark about civil society and solidarity. I think there is strong solidarity, but I also think that we have to recognize, acknowledge, and accept that civil society is not a uniform, monolithic entity. So there are some, I would say there are many organizations, for instance, I would say a broad majority that would endorse the proposals of the We the People's campaign, but it is not all, and that is okay, right? So I think that's legitimate, that within civil society, there are different opinions, and I think we are here also in this room to discuss different approaches, perspectives to democracy and other things. So that's, first of all, a general remark I want to make. And then strategically, it is true, I also think it is not enough that we are here and knock on the doors of UN ambassadors and that we advocate for these proposals for global governance innovation at the UN. I think what's really missing, and that is a little bit of a takeaway, I believe, of the We the People's campaign's efforts for the last 5 years. I mean, it's been very difficult due to the pandemic. That was disruptive, I think we have to acknowledge as well. But what's really missing is to show that there is a real domestic public demand for these innovations. So we have this international platform of international NGOs and groups, but all of these groups that are participating in these efforts would actually, I think that is important, they would actually have to build support on the ground in the capitals at home. So at least in democracies that's possible, and at least there is a way then through grassroots action at home to build support of the democratic governments for these things. And as a final note, I think the biggest problem with processes such as the negotiations on the Pact for the Future, as so often in the UN context, is the consensus requirement, right? So there will be many spin-off processes coming from the Pact for the Future, follow-up processes, and I think none of them will really be extremely satisfying from a civil society perspective if they are again consensus-based. There have to be decisions to be made and voting decisions. I mean, after all, it's been, the authoritarian states that quite openly in the negotiations on the Pact for the Future radically opposed civil society space, civil society inclusion. They would oppose language. And by the way, there were many efforts also to include references to democracy in the Pact for the Future, all of which have been thwarted, and they were not successful. So I think if there's something we could perhaps unite on, that is to say, this whole process of negotiations is completely dysfunctional, right? That is something that has to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. My name is Emily. I come from Oaxaca, Mexico, and I work in a feminist local NGO, and we have been for no more than 15 years, we've been building networks of women human rights defenders based on the situation of lack of protection, the situation of high risk, not just due to the attacks, but also due to the context of being a woman in civil society, facing different kind of attacks, inside of the NGOs, inside of the social movements, and inclusive inside of families sometimes. And we work in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador. And I wanted to raise one issue that I'm not sure, maybe, I'm sorry, I arrived a bit late, but I think it's not been raised. And for us, one of the main concerns we have now is forced displacement. So many women, human rights defenders, have to leave their home, women that are coming from indigenous context, communities, and they have to go from their communities. And it's really, well, as I was mentioning, work on those holistic feminist protection responses, and displacement is really the last stop. But last years, it's been increasing so much due to political context, but also the environmental context. And so I think it's a major issue that we should put in the center of the agenda and discuss a little bit. And I would like to hear your inputs on that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ibrahim. I am from Way Foundation. It's a nonprofit from Nigeria. My understanding of democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But when the government introduces policies that are elitist and anti-people, and the civil society is not even allowed to make any comments or to protest or to talk about those policies, and the space keeps shrinking. What's the role? What do you do? And then when you come to the UN, you're not even allowed to sit where the decisions have been taken. I was there, I was on the 4th floor, and I was feeling completely disconnected. I felt completely disconnected because I don't them. I cannot protest those policies that is supposed to protect me. I cannot even attend. I can't even contribute to the decisions that have been taken. So where does that leave me? And I see myself as somebody who is privileged. There are several civil societies back home that do not have access. They cannot even get the ECOSOC accreditation. They cannot get DGC accreditation. They do not have the resources to apply for visa. They cannot even transport themselves down to the to US. So I represent a huge population of people, and I cannot make decisions. I cannot contribute to the decisions that are being taken. So what is the role of the civil society? Why am I in the nonprofit sector if I cannot defend my own human rights or the people I represent? That's one. Secondly, women are continuously being marginalized. In Africa, we always use Rwanda as an example. But in Nigeria, where I'm from, and the largest Black continent, women are continuously being marginalized because one, for you to participate in politics, you cannot come in as an independent candidate. You must join a political party. Now, for you to join a political party, you need a godfather. You need somebody to speak for you. You cannot speak for yourself. Your credentials does not matter. Your capacity, your capability, your intellect does not matter. So what are those, what's the role of the civil society in advocating for women in decision-making, in leadership, in, in the roles keeps, the space keeps shrinking for women. I'd like your opinion on that.
Oh,
I'm Sabina Nochimensa from the since I came, I've sat in various that is what inequality cuts across. So what are we doing? I will suggest that as a society, we should focus on mainstreaming gender. Still, we've talked a lot about it, a lot has been done, but still more needs to be done. So that if we see gender as a system, okay, as a system of roles, attributes, and privileges, which is not determined by biology, but by our social, cultural, environmental, and economic status. I would suggest as NGOs or whatever society, let's strive in our various countries. We can even go ahead and draft affirmative action bills. Some countries have done, some have not. So let's go one by one. It takes time, but go ahead. Draft affirmative action policies. Follow up with the government. Sometimes it's not easy. I'm not saying go and fight, because if you go and fight and you are killed, I mean, what are you doing? You've lost. So gradually find nice ways of penetrating and bringing forth your ideas so that some of these bills could be signed into law. And when it is signed into law, then you have a chance to follow up to make sure it's working. And that way, I think we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Mojisola Akisoya, Nigeria, representing the Civil Society on Sustainable Development Goals at the subnational level. I still want to go with the tenant that says, let's stop agonizing and start organizing. Whether we like it or not, policy is there, rules are there to guide us. We cannot change what UN will say about, come and, engage at this space. They continue to look at the security, they continue to look at so many factors. But what we can do at civil society, I would say, for example, in Nigeria, we have a lot of policies going on from the new era now about shrinking space of civil society. But what we did is we bring ourselves together to come together and form what we call community of practice, where we guide even the least community organization at the rural level to guide them to say, okay, you want audited report for 3 years, somebody will mentor you to that, and we do that for them. So we help each other by partnership, by multi-stakeholder partnership and all that. So we want to forget about whining the action. And I think everybody can emulate that model. Community of practice that we do in Nigeria. Thank God for a Nigerian network of NGOs that are here represented also. We bring a lot of coalition together and forget about our competition, about our differences to make sure that we can fight the full force together. Thank you.
Back to you guys.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think just to stay within time, maybe the panel wants to react to some of the points made. It was extremely interesting, also extremely honest. Thank you so much for sharing this. Maybe there are some reactions on questions related to gender, the interconnected nature of civil societies, starting with the democracy not ending at the ballot box, how we can push for the implementation of initiatives, better coordination instead of antagonization, but also looking at the financial resources. I'll leave it at that. Whatever you want to react to, please feel free.
Take one for the team. Maybe I'll pull out one piece because, of course, I work with the Transparency, Accountability, and Participation Network, and I think maybe I didn't mention accountability. So I think thinking about accountability, I know there was an earlier question around how do we pressure for implementation, and I think something that comes to mind for me is and something we're working on within the SDG 16 Now campaign is to really leverage the power of storytelling, specifically telling the stories of civil society who are doing this work at national, subnational, community, grassroots level. Civil society have made clear commitments to a lot of the policies that governments are adopting or agreeing to at the international level. And so if we can really show and demonstrate the leadership of civil society in terms of actually committing to working towards these global goals that we have, that offers us an opportunity to really hold government accountable to their lack of action in a lot of cases. So that's one piece I really wanted to pull out. Well, pass it on.
Thank you. Maybe I can share a little bit of my story and kind of like what I do, because with Principle 10, I started working on 2003. So it was a long way until we got the Escazú agreement in 2016. So it's like almost 15 years of like working and advocating for it, and a lot of things has happened until we got that. But yeah, when you're in policy making, you cannot expect to have quick results. And what I see many youth is that they come to one meeting and nothing changes and they go very, but no, it's like with time, with understanding the problem, with sharing it, with trying to be part of it, learning the story, because also a lot of youth come and they think nothing has been done before. And that's also not true. There's a lot of knowledge from previous generations and of the different processes that have been going on that it's important to listen to. And I think the biggest problem with the new generation is that it's so disconnected from nature. They can call up on over 100 Pokemons that I didn't know there were so many, but they cannot name 5 species from their own area because they never go out from the city. There are a number of protected areas in the States and in all America, and people don't even know one. So my recommendation for Latin American youth is to learn what is their nature, tu herencia natural, because we are losing it and we're not aware. And yeah, suddenly we feel that we have not been listened, but we don't take the time to go and visit and learn a little bit about what we have, that richness. And I think that is one of the key issues that youth has to start doing, is to connect with nature. Visit the protected areas, the national parks, go to the park in the corner at least, but try to learn that. That's one thing. And around the women, in the Escazú agreement, in the negotiations, we're advocating for a gender action plan, because we know that in Latin America and well, all around the world, the fights of the women have been invisibilized and ignored, because and it's been ignored from such a basic level that in the community, if it's not the men who's leading the fight, they're not going to support the women. So many fights die within the crib, as we say. So it's important to visualize those fights and to keep on supporting women defenders. That is why we're advocating in the Escazú agreement to have an action plan. We already want that gender is transversalizado, mainstream, sorry. And we also, in the CDB, we have the target 23, which talks about gender equity and women's rights. And we have to keep on enforcing all these tools to include and visualize and recognize the participation and the women's struggles. Thank you.
Well, this was a fascinating conversation and reminds me why the People's Assembly is my favorite event during Anga Week. A lot of questions were asked, but a lot of those questions were actually answered in this room itself. So I just want to just say that if there's anything I've learned over the years is really is that we have to act with resolute optimism. There's lots of things that are wrong, and there are lots of people who work against us. But as long as we work with an open heart, we work in solidarity, and we recognize the African proverb that the sky is big enough for all the birds to fly, and we can all work together, and we can change the world.
Thank you. Maybe a few small reflections from my side. The gentleman here in the front mentioned democracy beyond the ballot box, and I think the economic democracy can be a core focus of this. And we have seen also that these policies, at least from some of the polling, are actually incredible. They have a huge amount of popular support. So I think in Europe, it's something like 84% of people support a tax on millionaires, and also very, very strong support for democratizing the IMF and the World Bank. So it's something, and I mean, I'm coming back to here. I mean, you mentioned the wonderful space that we have here, and I think one of the core focuses of this year's People Assembly is economic justice. And then I think back to earlier when we saw almost unanimous hands for the unjust nature of the system. So maybe there are probably other things that we all agree on here, of course, but maybe one big mobilization around that demand could get us quite far. So that's something to look towards. And then on this kind of language of the aristocracy or kind of the NGO safaris, I do fully agree. I think we need to have a hard look at ourselves, and I think it's a huge challenge because in order to go across the road and to go in there, you start to have to adopt the same language, the same mannerisms, the same culture, which is actually, I think, some of the root cause of the problem to start with. So we also need to have a talk about class as well when we think about these questions. But again, I really agree with what you mentioned, Mandeep, of the sky being big enough for all birds to fly. I think that's great. Thank you.
I have nothing else to say but to thank all the panelists and all of you for making this a super interesting debate. I mainly came here to learn, and I feel like there's so much expertise in this room. At least that was certainly achieved. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm Remo from the Heinrich Boell Foundation. I didn't introduce myself.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Our next session begins at 3, and it's a feminist fishbowl. So we're actually going to rearrange the room a little bit for that. So yeah, I will be getting Rebecca to rearrange the room, but just so you're aware, maybe keep a hold of your things and the chairs will be moving. But yeah, 30 minutes until the next session. Thank you. So that looked like it was set up because we wanted